I'm Karuna. I'm the founder and executive director for Mind Oasis, and my guest on Meditation Happy Hour is Dr. Adam Smith. How are you doing?
I am doing well today, thank you.
Good. So before we dive into who you are and where you live and all that jazz, I'd love to hear what your day has been like so far.
This week has been busy and different than even last week, which was busy and different from the week before. So I feel we're 2 weeks into a different way of doing things. And if you see me touching my face at any point in time during this entire conversation, please yell at me.
Oh, buzz! I should have a buzzer.
We should all have
your face. We should all have buzzers to buzz one another. Awesome, yeah. Awesome. And so, Adam, tell me a little bit about where you live, who you are, and what you're up to in this world.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Adam, as you have demonstrated knowledge of. I live in Austin, Texas. A very different place than Colorado, but with its own vibe, usually a pretty relaxed, carefree town. I'm a physician, primary care physician, and I work in a corporate setting. We staff corporate models of care and are actually pioneering different ways to deliver medicine, which has come in handy over the past couple of weeks in particular. So that's the gestalt of who I am and what I'm doing currently. And as I was mentioning just before we started the recording, spent my entire morning helping doctors learn how to use Zoom, some for the first time, as we switch our in-person visits to a virtual visit option for patients.
Cool. And then you're here not just because you are a physician, but also because you're a friend and because you are a mindfulness practitioner. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe your family and your mindfulness practice and things like that?
Yeah, no, thank you for reminding me. So for your listeners, my entire family is out of the house currently, all by design. And my wife in particular, whom some of you may know and may have heard last week, Kelly Lindsay, not only is she my wife, we have a small business together called Dakini Meditative. I have learned a lot from her. And yes, thank you. Thank you. We make cushions.
And what about your own mindfulness practice? What does it look like? Hi, Sammy.
It's about 25 pounds. It looks a little like this. So my practice is not a formal practice these days. We have a 2.5-year-old, and outside of a mindfulness challenge, month of having a formal seated practice every day, it is an integrated awareness of being as I go through my day. So that might look like taking a moment if my phone is delivering a text, my email is lighting up, and there's some patient urgency. How do I find a moment to kind of neo a little room into the energetic space of that moment? The classic examples are, being in traffic, and if somebody cuts you off, how do you insert a little space between your natural reaction versus extending some gratitude to that person and acknowledging that maybe they're having a worse day than you are, which is a funny thought if you're not even having a bad day.
Right.
7 a.m. or so. So I find myself actively practicing a technique of rooting back to my aspiration of showing up in a helpful and supportive way. And that is my sentence to myself that I repeat 100 times a day, which is a question of, am I being helpful and supportive? And how can I be helpful and supportive? And if I can't answer the first question, I certainly can't show up with a yes to the second question. So I would say my mindfulness practice is essentially a conscious return to those questions, which help me show up in the way that I'd like to show up most of the time in my life, both personally or professionally.
Does it always work, or are there moments?
It always works.
Wow, awesome. Very cool.
I can say that I can't think of a time when it hasn't worked. Meaning, I can't think of a time when it hasn't reminded me of where I want to be.
Ah.
Do I fail at getting there? Kelly could probably answer that question better than I can. I would say at work, I achieve that close to 100% of the time. I'm sure that in my personal life, I fall short of that.
That just makes you human. And the reason I kind of poked a little bit further or kicked it up a little bit more is because one of the things about Meditation Happy Hour, and really about Mind Oasis in general, is we're householders. We have personal responsibilities. We are not living in a cave. Some of us have small children. Some of us have grown children. We have pets. We have bills. We have responsibilities in the world beyond our meditation or mindfulness practices. And so we really talk about real talk for real people. So kind of in that sentiment, I do want to ask you a little bit more about maybe techniques or tips or tricks that you like to use to bring mindfulness in any situation, especially in light of COVID-19. But I think that one of the things that I'd like to dive into first is sort of where you see COVID-19 as of today. I think it's the 18th of March. I lost 2 days. You know, from your perspective as a physician, obviously knowing that this is just your personal perspective.
If COVID is a tunnel and it's 10 miles long, we're on probably mile 3
Ooh.
of the tunnel.
Whew.
And so my advice is stay in the car. Just stay in the car and just keep moving, because we don't really have a way to see beyond the headlights right now. And it doesn't mean that, we know that it will end. They're just things that we can't answer at this point in time. So we answer the questions that we can, and we do what we can. And just like anything else in life, to extrapolate from COVID to how I try to live my life, is you take the next best step that you can with all the information that's available to you at the time, make that best decision. And oftentimes from that next step, you open up a completely different vantage point and perspective from which you can then usually and hopefully make a better educated next step.
There's a lot of kind of conflicting information out there. And there's also sort of people like me who have really hunkered in. I also recognize the privilege that I have that I can do that. Mm. But I also see folks still having like play dates with their children. And one of the ones that I wonder about more specifically, that's maybe more general, is folks who are going and picking up to-go food. Is that right? Is that what we should be doing? It feels a little against the river, the stream, the advice.
To-go food meaning having any interactions with anyone at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, if coronavirus can live for 2 to 3 days, why wouldn't it live on food that's prepared by someone who doesn't know that they have it?
That's a good question when it comes down to how the food is being handled, for sure. So if you're dealing with food that isn't being cooked or heated to a temperature that's going to denature most enzymatic processes within the cell, then you have to hope that the person isn't coughing on your food. So there is an element of faith when you pick up your deli sandwich, to be sure. The other hope is that people are washing their hands, and that you wash your hand before you eat anything with your hands, or you do your best to mitigate, which is the jargon that we're using professionally. How do you mitigate the spread of the virus, understanding that being what it is, which is a respiratorily spread and a contact spread contagious infection, despite our best efforts, just like the common cold, we might get it anyway. With respect to play dates and kids in groups, that's a much easier thing to navigate. So the question is, do you have more control over washing your hands and taking your sandwich out of the wrapper that was picked up at the deli, preferably the drive-through, than going to the grocery store versus curbside pickup to get your groceries? So you're going to have to interact with people at some point, unless you're a hardcore prepper and are already in Montana on your 20-acre plot and probably are underground right now. So I think we all have to remember to take a literal deep breath and a figurative breath and say, okay, what am I doing to mitigate and lower my risk reasonably? And that means taking seriously the infectious potential of COVID-19, which is different from regular flu or even regular coronavirus, because there are other strains of coronavirus that cause common cold, which is helpful to know. This is just why we call it a novel strain, or the novel coronavirus. It is just a new version that we haven't seen before. Its level of contagion is higher than the flu. We also have a huge number of people in the population who are vaccinated every year now against the flu, which has reduced its level of contagion or its contagious potential. So there are some things to keep in mind and help us keep it in perspective. In terms of how dangerous it is, it's clearly pretty dangerous to select populations. There is a bit of I would say, potentially flawed impression that younger people are safe from it. Although on the same side of that coin, we are seeing what we suspect are milder, that we suspect there's a lot of milder disease in younger people. I don't think that that's licensed to continue to congregate in groups. I do think it's going to take a community mindset to stop the spread and this whole buzzword of social distancing. I liken to I'm sure it's a meme out there somewhere, a row of matches on fire, and how far apart do you have to have the matches before that fire can no longer make the leap? So if enough of us are making that effort in our communities, then we'll slow the spread either to our community or within our community.
One of the things that I've noticed is that even our teachers, who clearly, I mean, we all have a pretty dedicated practice. It might not be every single stinking day, but it's probably pretty close. And myself included, there have been a couple of days where I've woken up a little afraid. And it's not so much, I mean, I have a little bit of a cold. I'm 45. I'm healthy. I don't live in the city, so I don't have to really come in contact with people. So I don't fear for necessarily giving someone something either. What I do feel a little bit of fear around is our economy and our own personal finances. And I've heard more than one teacher make reference to, my God, I hope I have a home when this is all said and done. And I guess my question to you is, when you look at that 10-mile tunnel beyond health, do you have any sense for maybe what's to come, and or people without mindfulness practices? What are you saying to folks that come to you who don't have a practice to anchor to?
My first thought in response to that question is that I think much of what creates our situations is a lack of situational awareness and mindfulness. And some unwillingness to accept what's happening. You could make that argument I should say that argument has been made about how things were handled in the early days of the initial emergence of this in Wuhan, China, and could more have been done with the time that we had before it arrived here. What do we say to folks who don't have a mindfulness practice? I don't ever find that it's helpful to point that out to people.
I would have to agree with that.
My medical practice is hugely informed by my life philosophy. And so in answering these questions, my mind initially goes back to a specific moment with a patient or patients where the situation, the solution to the situation may seem so clear to me because I'm outside of it. And another vehicle for mindfulness that I use professionally is couched within this set of skills known as coaching psychology, philosophies and skills, where the goal is to encourage people to ask themselves how they could be differently or be different in a particular situation, or what they could be doing differently to achieve a different outcome for themselves. So in terms of encouraging our neighbors in our communities locally and then letting that expand outwardly, I think I would fall back on that positive inquiry, which is to invite people to share with you what's working well for them right now and what techniques and mindsets or philosophies are they drawing upon that they are finding helpful. Appreciative inquiry is the technical jargon for that, where I sometimes torture my family by asking them, what was the best part of your day today? Especially if it's clear that the day wasn't just a win across the board. So does that answer your question?
It does. I'm wondering how that works out for your 16-year-old daughter.
It works out.
Okay.
Sometimes I don't get an answer, but most of the time I will get a response.
A response, okay.
So it's important to note that appreciative inquiry or positive inquiry does not always elicit a response.
Okay.
But I do think it does prompt an internal reflection, whether that response is shared outwardly or not.
Sure.
I think it's a helpful question to ask when it's asked in earnest.
Absolutely. And even if you don't get a response, something has been sparked in the old brain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things to be concerned about with what's happening. And people bring that up, have brought that up every day since the news cycle began. And I think that we're all feeling the same level of apprehension and uncertainty. And as your students know, and as the general population may not know, that how we manage and deal with uncertainty is really, for me, my personal experience, at the root of happiness versus unhappiness. I've learned a lot from my wife about that. She has seen me struggle with uncertainty, and I feel as though the work that I've done over 20 years by myself before meeting Kelly certainly has been strengthened by having that light and that lens. Being able to see myself through someone else's eyes has been very helpful. So my goal when fielding other people's anxieties is to help them see things a little bit differently. If I can offer them another lens, not necessarily my lens, but find another perspective, even momentarily, that can sometimes make a big difference, just shifting that perspective for someone.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. So what are you finding, what's helping you right now?
Um, I would say that helping others is helping me right now. Yeah. I I would say helping others is helping me right now, and giving thanks for what I have.
Yeah, so it's interesting how when we can take the perspective off of ourselves and or the focus maybe is a better way of saying that, and place it on the other in the capacity that we have available to us, right? Um, how just little tiny acts of generosity can really help that person, but it's interesting how it almost amplifies your own well-being as you know as well.
It's I see this happening everywhere currently, which is to say specifically, I think a lot of us hold back. We have reserves that we store and that we protect for some eventual then that's out there. And this is one of those eventual thens where people think, oh, okay, this is either this is what I was waiting for, to be more open with my friends and family, to tell them how much I care about them, how much I love them, or okay, this is the time to loosen the purse strings and make sure that we support those people closest to us in an effort to, again, as one of a larger community, how do we minimize the ripple effect and contribute to the stability of our community?
If um, if across the nation we move in the direction of San Francisco or even Italy in the sense of really having to hunker down,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't know if it's from a physician perspective or an Adam perspective or a mindfulness meditation practitioner perspective, but do you have any words of wisdom if that happens and people are freaking out? And I think people will freak out. It's very anti-American to be contained.
I won't be surprised if that happens
Okay.
at all, whether it's in response to an elevation in COVID cases or whether it's as a preventive measure. Given what we're seeing in San Francisco or New York and some of the other bigger decisions that are leading the thought process. Here in Austin, we're in the middle, so we're watching the West Coast, we're watching the East Coast, and we're watching it as it's reaching us, and it has reached us. Personally and philosophically, it really is, the feeling that I have is that of being in the eye of the storm. There is an eerie calm that doesn't feel natural. And with respect to the American culture, of wanting to do things our way, being an individual, tackling things head on, it will be challenging for a lot of people. I think doing our best to respect respect your foe, respect your enemy is helpful. I think not overreacting is helpful. And that combination of respecting what we don't know um, might be a little bit different of an approach rather than the bravado that we typically would associate with the stereotypical American of I don't care what it is, I'm gonna go in there and by dang it,
Yeah.
we're gonna take it down. So I think a combination of the American spirit and a slightly novel use of I want to say communal mindset, which is like, we are all in this together. And I think that all of us are going to have to take a little for the team to get through it. And I don't think that anyone is going to feel untouched by it.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I was thinking back as we start to wind down, I was thinking back to, I guess it was 2008. Um, I was renting. I lived in Aspen, Colorado. I already couldn't afford where I lived, but the snowboarding was great. Um, I was a fundraiser, so my goals were cut down about 50%, but I still just met my goal. So I remained employed. I had a paycheck coming in. So for me, 2008 didn't affect me quite as much personally, though I did see my grandma, who had been financially secure, not wealthy, but financially secure like her whole life. She never recovered from the stock market crash because she didn't have time on her side. And 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 so something that I see different, apart from it being a little bit different scenario, is that I'm not entirely sure any of us are across the globe are not going to be affected. I mean, maybe someone up in the North Pole but I don't know that there's anywhere that won't be affected in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it feels like a wartime to me. Not having lived through wartime, everything about it feels like wartime, where at the worst case scenario, do we need to think a little bit more, um, again, big picture with respect to rationing things? Maybe we go without some of the niceties that we're used to. And again, just accept that this is how it is right now. It won't be like this forever. And how do you make do? I say make do in lieu of making the best of it, because for a lot of people, it's a pretty grim situation. And that's what they're facing in New York right now with the school closures. It's like, well, how do you take a hit for the country while completely pulling the rug out from the folks in your own neighborhood? Like that decision, that level of decision, I mean, there's just no way to make that easy for anybody when you know that the parents who can't work from home, who depend on school lunch. I mean, you've heard it. You've heard all of that on the radio or the news. Um, so I don't know. I think we just have to look out for ourselves, our personal health, understanding that without that, we really can't pay much else forward.
Yep.
And through taking care of ourselves, just as compassion practices teach us that taking care of yourself also helps everyone else around you, how do we increase our level of situational awareness so that we're not spending all of our time in fight or flight mode? Take a breath. The virus is going to jump out around the corner with a sword. So there is some opportunity to return to a level of de-escalation within ourselves, whether we're on shelter in place orders or what have you.
I am going to go wash my hands immediately after we get off our session here. And I was going to of course, itch my
Good
nose.
catch. Good catch.
That's great, but I caught it. I only got a half a beep. Ah! Okay, so one more thing I just want to add, and then I'm going to ask you if there's anything else you'd like to add, is I would be remiss if I don't say that Mind Oasis, thanks to donors like you and many others, we are offering community meditation for free through the end of June. It's daily, it's online, it's live, it's interactive. It feels very much like this. It's usually a little subscription of $15 a month, but we just immediately knew when COVID got real, at least here in the US, that people were gonna really be feeling it. Like the isolation, real or perceived, feels really different. Life feels very different. And so I just offer that up as a resource. It's easy to find. You go to mindoasis.org. It's right on our homepage. And of course, Adam, if you have patients or clients or even colleagues that aren't used to working from home, they're used to having their water cooler time, it's free for everyone. So
I recommended it to the colleagues in the office today.
cool.
And I routinely recommend it to patients. And as with any stressful period or crisis, there are opportunities to learn new things. It's always nice to learn something in an unpainful way. We will redefine what normal is after this, and having a space to come together in the absence of face-to-face, it's a great opportunity for people, to be sure. And we could talk for a lot longer about kind of the future role of technology in medicine and in mindfulness and in our daily lives. So it's interesting. It's been interesting to me having younger people in our household and out in the world during this. I was thinking, it's not going to be a big deal for them to maintain social distancing. There might be a problem with them seeing posted signs, but because they're always looking at their phone, which I did notice, which I have noticed. It's like, please do this or this, and people just walk right past it.
Right.
But my impression is that everyone's so connected that there really isn't much of a need for social interaction anymore. And this epidemic has proven how untrue that is, that people are still together all of the time. And I find that it's in many ways heartwarming, because it reinvigorated it's changed my view of, okay, we're not all just stuck in with our heads in the computer all the time. Clearly there are enough people getting together enough of the time to make this a pandemic. So from that perspective, it's like, okay, like we're doing okay. This virus came out of a new place. We haven't seen it before. We're having a pretty rough go of it right now, but I think that we will all get through it together. The world may look a little different at the end of that tunnel. And we may have some bruises and some work to do. I think we'll all have a little rebuilding to do, whether that's personally, professionally, financially, whatever cards are dealt us. And my hope, my aspiration for myself is to pay enough attention to what the people around me need in this time, and pay enough attention to what I need in this time so I can do that.
Awesome. It sounds like a compassion practice in action to me.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's a nice way to say that. Compassion practice in action.
In action, for sure. In space action. There you go. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining us on Meditation Happy Hour. We really appreciate you. And I just want to say thank you for your service, too. I think that so many of us are really grateful for the healthcare workers that are out there in the front lines, and you are certainly one of them. So thank you so much for all that you do.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me.